And this webinar is mainly going to be focused on some case studies we have from safety and compliance courses for Roche and for Regis Corporation. So my name is Stephen Bowler. I'm the marketing director at Bottom Line Performance. A little bit about me, I've had the chance to help with the design and development of some safety and compliance e-learning courses. I've had the opportunity to work with our product development teams as we've developed some of our game-based learning and gamified solutions, and I certainly do a lot of writing and research on the subject and talking to our clients and other professionals in the industry. So I've gotten to kind of observe a lot about the approaches that people use with their safety and compliance e-learning, and do a little bit of the design myself as well. And for those that don't know, our company, Bottom Line Performance, sometimes we're called BLP. We're a custom learning solutions company based in Indianapolis. We were founded in 1995, so we're celebrating our 20th year in business, and we design and develop a lot of different types of learning solutions, certainly a lot of e-learning, blended learning. We were just looking at some great examples of instructor-led safety training this morning in a meeting. And a lot of the approaches that we're going to show you today have been award-winning, and they've won awards or earned some recognition in our industry. So I feel very good about what we're going to show you today, and I hope that you'll find something that you can take away into the work that you're doing. So I'd love to know, for those of you listening, like, what has brought you to the webinar today? What are you hoping to get out of it, or what is your reason for coming? I have listed a few on the screen here, some of the common reasons why people often come to this presentation when we're giving it. Perhaps you're developing safety training and you're not sure what type of training you need. Maybe you need to know what kind of safety training you can create that will be engaging, and you're not sure how to do so. Or perhaps you're just unsure about what gamification is and how it applies to safety training. So I'd love to see some of your thoughts and reasons for coming to the webinar today. And feel free to type those into the chat. Great, I see someone here saying they need their safety training to be more engaging. Yes, I think that's a common theme for a lot of folks in a lot of different industries. I see I'm interested in gamification, but have not yet really applied it to any of my courses yet. Awesome. Well, the 4 courses that we're going to show you today all have varying levels of gamification integrated into them, so hopefully it'll be helpful for you. And then I see here the need to gamify content, not just assessment. That's a really good point, and there definitely is a difference. So, okay. So here's our agenda. First, we're going to talk for just a few minutes about what gamification actually is and what are some of the reasons for using it. And then we're going to jump into those case studies. So we'll look at the Roche Safety Group and the challenges that they had, their reasons for gamifying their e-learning or making it more engaging. And I'll walk you through those courses. Then we'll go into the Regis Safety Group and the challenges they had, and I'll give you an example from one of their courses and talk about their new safety curriculum. And then we'll give you some tips and resources for building your own case internally if you're trying to kind of sell the idea of gamified or engaging safety training within your organization. So first of all, what is the difference between games and gamification? I know there's a lot of different buzz terms and words tossed around in our field: serious games, game-based learning, game learning, gamification. And there is a difference between gamification and all of these other words that tend to refer to some sort of game. And our definition for a game that we use here at Bottom Line Performance is a little bit wordy, but very specific and I think useful. And we refer to a game as an activity that has an explicit goal or challenge to it. That activity has to have rules that guide achievement of the goal. There, of course, needs to be interactivity happening either between the players or just between a single participant and the game itself. This one's very important, that a game has to have feedback mechanisms. So giving clear cues to someone if they're doing well or they're not doing so well. And that's why games work so well for learning, is the feedback that they give. And games, of course, have to have a quantifiable outcome. You're able to win, you're also able to lose. You're able to hit the target or not hit the target. And many games often will elicit an emotional reaction in players, either through the story or through the heat of the competition or some other means. Now, gamification is a little bit different. Gamification is where we take some of the elements of games and we apply it to a non-game setting. So one of you shared you wanted to see the difference between gamifying content and gamifying an assessment. That what they're referring to is different game design techniques or different parts of a game and the ways that you apply them to content or through a test that someone's taking to help kind of pull them through the experience or to engage them on a deeper level. So some of the game elements or parts of games that we often point our clients towards are the use of aesthetics or the use of a story, creating a conflict, using a little bit of chance, or allowing learners to, in higher level learning interactions, employ a little bit of strategy. All of these can be applied to a non-game setting. So obviously there are a lot of reasons to gamify, and I think that most of the folks here today are probably interested in gamifying because you simply want to engage your learners. You want them to, actually remember the safety procedures and not simply comply or check the box, but actually make a safer workplace by engaging them more with learning or training. So there's a lot of great reasons to try to gamify or use other means of making safety training more engaging. So what we've found is that the elements needed for learning can be very carefully and intentionally matched to a variety of game elements that support those types of learning. And this table here comes from a white paper that our president, Sharon Bowler, actually wrote. And this table lists the common elements needed for learning. So a learner has to be motivated. A learner needs relevant practice to build a new skill or acquire knowledge. A learner needs to receive consistent and preferably immediate feedback during the learning experience. And a learner also needs to be able to retrieve that knowledge later and apply it on the job in order for it to be useful. So there's a variety of different game elements that very specifically can be tailored to each one of those learning elements. So if you want to motivate your learners, including a game goal or challenge or creating some conflict, providing rewards, letting them earn points or achievements, all of these things can motivate your learners. Having a goal or a challenge that is familiar or relates to the work environment can be very useful for giving them opportunities to practice. Feedback, the reward structures in games, the way that a game supplies feedback as people go, that game loop, or even the feedback that you get in an e-learning scenario when you're doing well or when you're not doing well. These can all be used to help provide that feedback. And then lastly, games can give a lot of different, can help with retrieval in a lot of different ways. So if you have created a context or a story and you've basically generated some emotion through those game elements, that's going to be a more memorable experience than something that was more just content or fact-based. And then also the desire for repeat play, getting someone to want to try a scenario multiple ways. Doing something multiple times and getting that repetition can also help with the retrieval later. And as I said, what we really are after here is just a better way to do compliance or safety training. Too many learners are, when they hear safety course or hear safety training, they're already thinking about that e-learning course that you see on the screen there with the stock photography and the huge block of text and the next button. And while this might help us meet an OSHA requirement, it doesn't always actually teach someone what they need to keep themselves or keep their coworkers safe. So let's get into some case studies. The first three courses that I'm going to show you are were created for Roche Diagnostics. And Roche Diagnostics, Hoffmann the Roche is based in Basel, Switzerland, but Roche is based here in Indianapolis, where we are located. And we've worked with Roche for about 10 years now, and a good portion of that work has been with the Roche Safety Group here. And they have a variety of different OSHA-required training topics, a lot of requirements, and they always are trying to match those to the learning objectives in their courses. Employees are taking this stuff annually, and really oftentimes prior to our work with Roche, the e-learning was perhaps seen as a little bit of a check-the-box activity. So some of the previous courses, at Roche were text-heavy, or perhaps it's just a standard operating procedure on a Word document or a PDF. And really, Roche was looking for ways to make that more engaging, to make it more memorable, and to help people find themselves in these procedures. So our first example is all about taking a document of procedures that someone has to follow and turning that into a challenging scenario that consistently asks them what they would do in that situation. So this course was on building evacuation. It was for a Hoffmann the Roche campus, actually at Nutley, New Jersey, and they had 25 buildings there. And all of those buildings had different alarm systems, evacuation guidelines, depending on the type of building. And they had this procedure for evacuating that was outdated and a little bit difficult to use because they had all these different building types. And they wanted a way to really make sure their employees knew how to safely evacuate no matter what building they were in. So we took that big Word document and created a gamified e-learning course that's really, the core of the course is really these 3 different scenarios. And every scenario is asking the learner, what will you do now? And you can see right away some game elements that we've taken to gamify this course would be the aesthetics, the theme that you see in the background, the use of the graphics. That is a game element that we've taken to gamify the content and make it a little bit more engaging right off the bat. Another element would be the use of the feedback loops. So in these scenarios, as you progress through the buildings, the scenarios start to become more challenging, and you start to actually see the consequences of your actions. So you're seeing a screenshot here where I apparently tried to clean up a spill that I couldn't handle, and it's telling me that the spill is getting larger and a coworker has now come over and is noticing. So I now have to try again. So that's a feedback loop happening, and that's also creating that challenge that I have to try to overcome in this experience. And the course also provides feedback through, there is as you'll see when I get into the course, a learning agent or a helpful learning agent, Frank, who is always in the corner of the screen. And if I press the Ask Frank button, he's going to give me some tips or guidance on the challenge that I'm currently in. And then that evacuation process, we streamlined that, put it in a more graphically driven, shorter document that covers just the need-to-know information of the process. And then, as I said, that feedback, those consequences get more intense as the game goes on until in the final scenario you have the possibility of actually sending your coworker to the hospital if you do not follow the right procedures. So it really builds that challenge. It provides consequences. It provides feedback consistently to accomplish that. And I'm going to jump out of the slideshow and show you a little bit of this course. So what you're not going to be able to hear, because my audio is through the phone and not the computer, is you're not going to be able to hear the sounds that start playing in this course. And that's probably a good thing, because right now, if you were hearing this, you would be hearing an alarm that sounds exactly like the alarm on the Nutley campus. So as I've jumped out, I'm immediately seeing it saying fire. A fire has broken out inside the fume hood. The smoke alarm has been triggered. What should you do now? And if I answer incorrectly on this scenario, it's just going to shake the screen and give me some feedback, and I get to keep trying. So the first scenario is intentionally guided. And I can keep going on a few of these. and I'm just gonna move right through the scenario, and if I'm doing well, I'm gonna move forward. If I'm not doing well, it just has me try again immediately. Now I'm gonna jump out into the third scenario here. I'm actually gonna skip the second scenario. And now this is the hardest scenario, and here I immediately see you decided to return to your office early from lunch. A coworker is slumped down on the floor and non-responsive. You can smell a strange odor. What should you do? So if I make a really bad choice, I'm going to see an immediate consequence here. You are overcome by the gas and pass out. Hopefully, security will arrive soon to help. Please try again. So if I try again, I'm right back where I was. I've gotten my feedback. I'm in that feedback loop, and I have to keep moving through this. So if I make a correct response, it's going to let me move forward. And it looks like I, once again, didn't make quite the right decision because your coworkers didn't know about the gas because they didn't hear the alarm. I never pulled it. So people all over the building are incapacitated. That's quite unpleasant. But it creates a little bit of emotion through the experience that you wouldn't just have if you were progressing through the scenarios without getting feedback or just taking a post-test. So I think you get the idea on this course. I want to emphasize that I know that webinars, sometimes the speed that courses are showing it doesn't quite play up to speed. So if you want to see these in a more controlled setting, I can certainly get you connected to somebody who can show you more of these courses after the webinar. But for now, I want to go into our next course. And this example is really to show you how you can use theme and characters to gamify any learning course. So this course was hazard communication. So it's all about how hazardous materials are labeled in a lab or in a work environment so that the employee can protect themselves. And this is a required course. It was a click next, text-driven, very linear course, and it had a post-test at the end. Very simple, very straightforward. So when we started working with Roche to kind of reimagine that course, we took an agile and an iterative approach to doing so. So since this was going to be a very different approach than the previous course, we wanted to provide a lot of small pieces for Roche to react to. So it was agile, it was iterative, you're providing prototypes and concepts as you go. We decided that we wanted to make this course very activity-driven and take all of those blocks of text and turn them into even simple interactions that learners actually have to do. We decided to use a learning agent, and Roche really liked the idea of having a superhero theme and a storyline. And so we take the content of this course, and one simple way that you can gamify a course is to just give it a challenge, something that's memorable. So in our case, the goal of this course was to become a safety sidekick. So you can see that once again, we've organized the course into this map, and the map is another way of gamifying with the aesthetics and creating that little bit of theme there. So I'm going to go out into this course as well. And one second. There we go. So let me get this dragged over. There we go. So when I first launched the course, the first thing I see is this video. And the screen starts shaking, and are my superheroes flying on the screen. And a lot of that that big paragraph of text that you could kind of see in my screenshot of the old course has been transformed into this subtitled video. And I'm hearing about my challenge to become a safety sidekick, start hunting down the hazards in the lab and protect my coworkers and protect myself. So that already is a lot more engaging. And here I'm getting some facts about how many people are exposed to hazardous materials, what the risks are, and that story is really told in the context of this theme. So if I fast forward through the video a little bit, I now have a series of buildings that I'm going to have to go through to save us from the hazards here. The first building, the activities are very simple intentionally. So it's simple tell information, but even just having someone click on the screen, and I'm clicking the label to reveal different parts of the label. That's a much more engaging way to provide the tell of a course than simply putting that text on a screen. And now we have some simple activities where we've organized the content, and we're already starting to text or test the learner a little bit. And if you get it wrong, you have to try again. You get that immediate feedback. And you're able to just kind of keep moving through these activities. Now, in other buildings, the feedback becomes a little bit more emotional. We do it in a comical, whimsical way, but we're showing the consequences of what can happen. So we have a coworker here, another character whose name is Clumsy Clyde, and he's a great guy, but he makes mistakes that can sometimes have big consequences. So we're going to follow him around and try to help him avoid making common mistakes. So we have to click the icons to add or remove them from Clyde before he enters the lab. So I'm obviously going to take this lighter out of his hand. I'm going to take the drink out of his hand, and I'm going to put his lab coat on. So that's pretty straightforward. And now in my next scenario, I'm going to click the icons to go through Clyde's routine in the lab. But if I do something wrong, I'm going to get that immediate feedback here that I needed to put this in a different container. And now on my next screen, I can see that Clyde is a little beat up. He's got a black eye now. So these things can start to creep up on us as we go through the course. So some of these modules are going to have more tell information broken into these videos. Just, again, presenting that in a more engaging, fun way to keep the learner's attention and to keep their mind in the theme or the challenge that we've created in the course. So we're very excited about that HazCom course because actually just a couple weeks ago we found out that it was a silver winner in the Horizon Interactive Awards for 2014. So we feel really good about the approaches in there and how they've been perceived for the learners. So our next example is looking at breaking a course into levels. And once again, another example of using video for the tells, and just another way of showing you how characters and theme can be used in a course. So this course is about bloodborne pathogens. This is once again a required course at Roche. It was previously a click next to continue text-driven course, and it had a post-test. And we wanted to create some characters, create a theme, a little bit of a story to try to make that more engaging, but also provide a way for more senior employees to take the test and perhaps test out of the course and still get the compliance credit. So we created a gamified course, and you can see that it's a lab broken into levels. And as we're going through, the challenge now is to avoid the BBPs, to protect the lab from these bloodborne pathogen villain characters here that are represent various pathogens. So we present that once again in a series of videos to minimize the tell. So if I go out into this course, so my video is starting, and once again, you're not hearing the music, you're not hearing the sound effects here, but I'm learning about the dangerous organisms that I have to be on the lookout for. And you can see this video going across the screen, which was created in After Effects, I believe. And it's just kind of giving me that background information and establishing my goal for the course. So the goal here was just to really show what actions need to be taken if the employee is exposed to a BBP. And then it's their job to avoid the BBPs throughout Roche by going through each level of the lab and trying to clear them out. So I go in here, and my first question is actually, have you had BBP training at Roche before? So if you say yes, you have the opportunity to just take the test out, and you don't have to go through the course. And if you say no, then you are going to go through it, but it's going to be this experience that will hopefully be a better way to learn this type of content. So if I jump out into the first lab, I'm going to see a video, once again, kind of introducing me to how to identify the hazards. So I'm going through this, and again, this would have previously just been tell content on a screen. And you can see that those characters, the villain characters, are integrated throughout the video, kind of keeping that storyline going. I'll skip through this a little bit, and it's showing how BBPs can spread very quickly. Okay, so now I enter the level. And so I can see that for this level, I have 2 different challenges to do in order to clear the lab. So I go into my first challenge, and it says that Marcus has discovered BBPs have removed all the biosafety labels from the lab. So the BBPs are personified a little bit here. Biohazard labels warn you of potentially hazardous materials that could have an impact on you. So I need to figure out what should be labeled. So if I do that incorrectly, I'm going to get, it says, oh no, you must have missed an item in the lab. Try again in this lab. So I can try here, and if I get that wrong, it's going to drop me back to the first lab and say, one last chance, look for 4 items. So it's progressively giving me a little bit more help. And this time I think I got it right. So now it's giving me some feedback, explaining and giving me, so I know going forward what to do. So now every one of these challenges is going to be different. So this one here, now I'm reviewing the sign on the lab door, or Marcus is reviewing the sign, and I need to decide if it is safe to enter. So you can see there I cleared my first level, and now I could go through into level 2. Once again, I'm going to get a video kind of introing this for me. And then I could go in and start clearing out the challenges for this lab. And this lab actually has 3 challenges in it. Okay. So the BBPs course, we were really excited with that course. We were able to, that was a best game-based solution at the DevLearn Demo Fest 2013. And we also just found out a Horizon Interactive Award silver winner. So we're feeling really positive about the approaches used in that course for sure. Now our last course is going to be once again an OSHA compliance course, this time for Regis Corporation. So we're going to be looking at how a different company with a different type of learner is handling this. So Regis Corporation, they have 40,000 salon employees at hair salons across the country, and they have the managers, and they have to receive health and safety training for OSHA compliance. And they were previously receiving that in an instructor-led format. They wanted to try online learning, but knew that the implementation would be difficult because every salon is only going to have one computer somewhere either in the back or even sometimes in the front of house at that salon. So they needed to make this learning modular. They needed to make it something that salon people could complete in a 5-minute chunk, and they needed to make the learner experience better, or they wanted to make the learner experience better and more engaging. So we created a curriculum of several different courses, And each one of those courses has activities that can be completed in a 5-minute burst. And we actually just created the first few courses and designed some others and then gave Regis the tools and templates so that they could cost effectively go on and continue creating their safety curriculum going forward. And we gave the whole curriculum this magazine style branding look and feel that would be consistent across all courses. So it really went beyond the course. There was an online catalog of templates and images that Regis's instructional designers now have access to, and they have a style guide and layouts and interactions, and this just makes it faster for them to put out interaction-rich e-learning that has some gamified elements in it. So the courses all have a magazine style look and feel. So if I jumped out into the ergonomics course, which I'm not going to show you this particular course, I would see these categories there on the left side, and this actually is going to look very similar for all the courses. The illustrations are definitely designed to be fun, similar to the Roche illustrations, but there really is another purpose for using illustrations in e-learning. Now, when e-learning is being delivered to multiple different locations, creating an illustration means that no learner is going to feel like that's not my lab or that's not my salon. The illustration makes it feel a little bit more universal, while also being another element of or a way of gamifying the experience somewhat. And then the course, as I said, there's very little tell. It's all just broken into a series of small challenges or interactions. So in this case, in this image here, I would just be going through the lab and finding all the hazards and answering questions about them. So the Slips, Trips, and Falls course that I'm going to show you, every single activity is a scenario. They're getting those consequences. They're getting the immediate feedback loops. It's visual with as little text as possible. The challenges are designed to be motivating and perhaps add some context and emotion. And then because of the constraint of the computer being in the salon, we provide an audio or a transcript option for the course. So all of these challenges in the courses, I make a decision and I'm immediately going to see the consequence of that decision if I don't make the right choice. Or if once again, I do something unsafely and I'm going to see my long-term consequence there. So in this case, in this particular activity, I'm missing my kid's soccer game because I'm rehabbing from my injury that I sustained at work when I didn't follow the proper process. So we'll jump out and show you this course. So I've gone through my intro now, and I already had this queued up, and I'm going to jump into my first activity, and I can actually complete these in any order that I want. So I'm hearing some background information right now. Once again, it's been muted, and you're not hearing this, but the character is speaking right now, giving me a little bit of background for what I'm about to do. So if I get started here, my job is to click on everything that I see that is wrong in the lab. So a little bit like almost like a Where's Waldo, or find everything in this picture if it isn't right, and start answering the questions. So I see a spilled product. When should it be cleaned up? If I get the wrong answer, slip, immediate feedback. So I need to try again. And I think we could all guess that the answer is, well, it probably needs to be cleaned up right now. And that is correct. And that really starts to become the theme, is that most of these things, what they want the learner to be doing is cleaning them up immediately and not leaving them out. So I'm going to go into another activity here. So once again, I'm getting a little bit of background info that you unfortunately cannot hear. And this is going to be an activity that's showing the time element of how long something takes, or whether it really saves time to be unsafe. And I think I saw the question earlier. The courses we showed you before were created in Lectora, using the Lectora shell, but with a lot of different custom elements added. And this particular course I'm showing you now was created in Articulate Storyline. So designed to be very fast and rapid for Regis's employees to continuously create new courses. So I'm trying to click on all the hazards I see, and when I'm finished, I click Submit, and that timer's going. So that time-based element adds a little bit more challenge and to this. Okay, so I submit, slip. I didn't do good enough. So I may have missed a hazard or two. It says there are 6 in the scene, and I have the opportunity to try again. 1, 2, 3, 4. Oh, your phone rings with a call. Do you answer it or ignore it? So this challenge is interesting because it was created in Articulate Storyline. There's nothing incredibly groundbreaking going on programmatically, but the way that it's spaced out, it's designed to simulate that rushed, hurried environment of a hair salon in the form of a e-learning challenge or a small interaction. And while this course is certainly not a game as a whole, each one of these interactions has little pieces and parts, different little game elements that are going to make it more engaging or interesting to that salon employee. So you might be sensing a trend with the courses that I choose to show. The Slip, Trips, and Falls course was a silver winner in last year's Horizon Interactive Awards. So again, all of the different tools and approaches we used in these courses have received some positive feedback from our industry as well. So let's talk a little bit about building the case for games or engaging learning in your organization. So first of all, online learning is, if you're not using it already for safety and compliance, it is a lot easier to show OSHA compliance when that is part of your goal. If you have those courses in an LMS and you're tracking the completion or you're tracking the post-test score, that information is all right there, readily available, very easy for you to keep track of. Much easier, especially, than instructor-led training. Using techniques that are designed to make the learning more engaging is also a great start, or at least a part of creating a culture of safety at your organization rather than a culture of compliance. When I think of a culture of compliance, I think of those text and next courses that are really just designed to check the box. But really showing people the consequences, using some game elements to make it a little bit more realistic and a little bit more of an emotional experience are a great way to motivate learners to care more about safety. Illustrations, the use of them in e-learning, is also a wonderful way to make sure that your safety training transfers to all of the possible job situations and job sites that are out there. And then finally, those activities that I showed you, those game elements are really just safe practice opportunities. So if I'm a hairstylist and I was just taking that last interaction and I'm practicing, you know, finding the hazards and my phone's ringing and the clock is ticking, that's probably pretty realistic to my job, and that's a great way to get a little bit of practice in that'll hopefully help me perform better in the future. So we have some tips for you if you're interested in gamifying your learning, and some things you can do, and we have done many of these things in our process of building skill in gamification. And the first one here, and Sharon Bowler, our game expert, will tell you this again and again, that it's really important to play and evaluate a lot of digital games before you design a course that's supposed to be gamified. You'll get a lot of different ideas for mechanics you could try or elements that might be useful, and it's just a great way to build your skills and abilities. If you're starting a new learning initiative and you want to gamify, it can be really great to just select one course as the pilot and to use that as a proof of concept with your stakeholders for convincing others in the organization that this is a good idea. Just like I showed you earlier, you can match your learning objectives and you can match the type of learning that you need to have happen to specific game elements. and then you can match those to the goals of your course. So if you know that you need to motivate learners, and that's part of the goal is to motivate or get people to buy in, then you want to look at those game elements that are most tied to motivation, and so on. It's important that for every learning objective, you look at what practice activities you can have for that objective. And certainly sketching it out, perhaps even doing it on a whiteboard or just with good old pen and paper is a good place to start there. And for each activity, you can think about various game elements that might make sense in that activity. Our last two tips for you, certainly having an engaging aesthetic and a theme. You saw that in all 4 of the courses that I showed you. And we found through our feedback that we get on these courses and survey results and whatnot that that really can impact and affect the desire people have to complete a compliance course. And lastly, this one can be a little counterintuitive to some folks, but fantasy really does have a high appeal, even to those corporate learners who you might not think of as being interested in those BBP villains or something like that. But we found that it can provide a really nice break from the routine and a break from the normal. And there also has been some great research on how fantasy can be used to build memory because it just really sticks out in the mind. So a few strategies for long-term retention. If you want your learners to really retain that policy or procedure and be able to apply it, a few things that we try to think about when we're designing courses. It's very helpful to provide frequent spaced intervals and multiple repetitions of your key concepts to really make sure you're hitting on those objectives. You want to make sure you're providing immediate feedback. Most of the courses you saw provided immediate feedback in every activity so that someone knows how they're doing as quickly as possible. And you probably also noticed this in these courses that there were a lot of little mini stories or small little scenarios that are designed to really build relevance and also help build that memory. So if you're interested in the retention piece, I encourage you to go to our website and check out the white paper, When Remembering Really Matters, which Sharon Bowler wrote. And that is an excellent white paper with 4 strategies for learning and 4 strategies for remembering that you can apply to your training. And if you're interested in still gathering more examples of safety courses to inspire your learning, I encourage you to have a look at our Safety and Compliance Lookbook that we just released last month. That lookbook has 17 different samples in it of different types of safety training in a variety of styles. All of the examples that I showed you today were illustrated, but we also have some great examples of photo-driven or instructor-led training that has worked really well for other clients. And then lastly, if you're looking to gamify, we have some great blogs on both of our Bottom Line Performance and Knowledge Guru website. And we also have some white papers specifically on gamification, including a white paper on using those different game mechanics and game elements. And then lastly, I highly recommend you take a look at Dr. Carl Kopp's book, The Gamification of Learning and Instruction, because it's a great resource when you're first getting started with gamifying a course. And his corresponding gamification field book that came out a year or 2 after the initial book is also useful. So I'm going to leave my contact information here and then start to turn to the Q&A. My colleague Jake, you might have seen him answering some questions as we go, has been monitoring, and I'm going to take a look now. If you have any questions, I'll be happy to answer those. So we have a question here. How many people work on a particular course, and how much time does a course take to develop? Well, Andrew, that really depends on the course, of course. So sometimes only one person might work on a course. Typically it's 2 or 3. You know, you have someone who is designing it or writing the script for it, and then you have someone else who is doing all the multimedia pieces. And the time that it takes to develop a course depends on the complexity of the course. It depends on the review cycles that the client has. So if a lot of different people have to look at it and get their input and stamp on it, a single course could take a few months. But if the process is very streamlined and the content is already well defined, a course could take a week or two to get to a pretty far along stage. And it also depends on what program we're using to develop in. Besides the custom courses that we do, we have a game-based learning platform called Knowledge Guru. And I was just talking to someone today who, including the client reviews, they were able to completely launch a game in 2 weeks using that platform. So it really just depends. We were asked, do you use other programs and tools besides Lectora and Storyline? So I was just talking about Knowledge Guru. We have our own proprietary game-based learning platform that we've done some compliance training with, and we use that. And we also do a little bit with Adobe Captivate. And we also, some of the games that we develop are very custom, and we wouldn't be able to do them even in Lectora. So we use a tool called Construct to develop some of those games. And sometimes we mix and match. We might create a custom app and put it in a Lectora shell. Lectora tends to be the most flexible for putting JavaScript or putting other types of code inside of it, but then get that LMS tracking with the Lectora shell. Of all the examples you saw, I guess actually, Jennifer, one other point I want to make is that the videos you were seeing were, I think, all made with Adobe After Effects. Another question, did the game seem to run well with any LMS? Well, a lot of the, 3 of the courses I showed you were all for Roche, so those were all going on Roche's LMS. And since they were only for Roche, I can't speak to how well they would work on any LMS. We've worked with a variety of LMSs, and we always make it work for whatever LMS the client has and needs it to work on. And the Regis course, the Regis course was the least custom of those 4. I mean, obviously completely custom with graphics and approach, but it didn't have a video or some of the more code-heavy elements in it. So I imagine that course is now sitting on Regis's LMS, and it works well on that LMS. So. Is there a minimum connectivity speed recommended for these courses? Not particularly. I mean, you certainly wouldn't want to be using dial-up. If it's in an LMS, sometimes it actually is locally hosted on the company's intranet. It really just depends, once again. I'd be happy to follow up and ask that question to someone on our multimedia team and see if they have any best practices, but I'm not quite sure on that one. Any other questions? Great. Well, thank you, everyone, for attending. We have been recording this session, and we will send the recording to you after the webinar so you can pass it on to others in your organization. And we'll also send you that safety and compliance lookbook along with perhaps a couple of other PDFs that might be useful to you. So thank you very much.